So let me walk you through how you could kind of work through this alignment problem that you can have with not having sandbox and production aligned. So let me jump right into how Salto can kind of help you with that initial problem. How do you keep those environments aligned so you can actually use your sandbox effectively? So just as kind of a foundation for Salto, Salto is a configuration management platform for Zendesk as well as some other best business applications. And Salto will basically run a fetch to pull down all of the configuration metadata that makes up a Zendesk instance. That could be a sandbox instance or a production instance, and allow you to first explore what's currently set up. So for example, I can take a look at all of the triggers that I've got set up in this case in my sandbox environment. And if I click on a specific trigger, I can also see where that trigger, all the dependencies of that trigger. In this case, I can see that it's relying on a group and a ticket field. I can click in on that ticket field, and I can also see where that ticket field is being referenced. Very, very helpful for impact analysis, understanding that if I were to make a change to this ticket field, add an option, maybe change it from a multi-select to a single select, change it to a checkbox, it could potentially impact these 17 other elements. In this case, we've got 2 automations, 6 macros, and so on. Now, once Salto has all of that configuration metadata that makes up the environment, we're able to then run deployments between environments. Now, the first step to running a deployment between any 2 environments in Salto is comparing those environments. So let me just show you what that is going to look like. So in compare and deploy, I'm going to select my source and my target environment. So in this case, I'm selecting my source environment as my sandbox, and for my target environment, I am selecting my production. And I am going to call this, let's see, update macro. Because ultimately what I'd like to do is take a change that I made to a macro in sandbox and push that all the way up to production rather than having to configure that manually. So as soon as I create a deployment in Salto, a comparison deployment in Salto, it's immediately going to show me a comparison of all the differences or the deltas between those 2 environments. So in this case, sandbox and production. Now, just to kind of break down what we're looking at here, what this screen is basically telling me that if I want to get production to mirror sandbox, so to get it to look exactly the same as sandbox, that will require 869 changes. Now, just to let you know, these 2 instances, I'm mostly using these for demo purposes. That's why we've got a lot of differences here. So this would be a great place to kind of come in and really understand, why do I have so many differences between these environments? So in Salto, we are also going to split out those differences by additions, modifications, and deletions. Additions, you can think of them as basically, these are all the net new configurations. These are configurations such as triggers, automations, fields that are sitting there in Sandbox that have not yet been added to production. Vice versa, deletions are all of the configurations that are in productions, maybe hot fixes, changes made directly in production that have not been moved to Sandbox. So this is probably going to be one of the biggest sources of misalignment between the environments, is elements that simply don't exist in one versus the other. Then in this middle tab, Salto is going to show you the modifications. In other words, configurations that exist in both, but might have some sort of difference. Maybe you've changed the title, maybe you changed the condition of a trigger, but you can identify the differences here. So let me show you an example of what a difference of a macro could look like. So I've got this dark mode macro that I've updated in Sandbox. Now, I can see specifically, looks like I've added a ticket field and as well as a specific option as one of the actions for this macro. Now, in case you're here in a comparison in Salto and you're trying to understand, what, I don't remember making that change, or I don't really know exactly what that looks like in the Zendesk UI. Within Salto, you can always just go directly to that element in the source or the target environments. But let's say that I want to go ahead and add this change to production. So I'm going to go ahead and select this. Now I've selected basically to add this action, to add a ticket field and one of those options. As soon as I add that, Salto, because it knows the dependencies and whether the dependencies exist in the target environment, it's going to flag that we've got a couple of required dependencies, in this case, a ticket field and a ticket field custom option. So I want to go ahead and add those for deployment. So this is really helpful because Salto is going to flag not only the change that you've made, but any related changes to make sure that you get everything together in one go when you deploy into production. Now, it's really common when you select maybe a more complex configuration like a trigger, you're probably going to have a chain of dependencies, but Salto is going to keep track of that. And as you add more and more elements to your deployment, you're going to be able to see those dependencies, add them to the deployment. Now, if I were to move forward with this deployment, let me go ahead and actually do that. Salto will first kind of validate that we can actually push these changes into production, and then ultimately you can use Salto to actually push that change into production. All right, so it looks like in this case, I was able to kind of move forward to the next step. Basically, Salto is running some kind of pre-deployment validation, making sure that the changes can be deployed into production. Now, at this